The sun poured through the tall windows of St. Augustine's Cathedral like liquid gold. Every piece of colored glass, red, blue, green, and yellow, painted dancing rainbows across the wooden pews. White roses covered every corner. Fat candles flickered on silver stands. The whole place smelled like flowers and something sweet, like hope mixed with perfume. 200 people sat in their fancy clothes, whispering and smiling. Ladies wore dresses that sparkled. Men tugged at their tight collars. Everyone was waiting for the most important moment, the moment when James Whitfield would marry Victoria Ashton. At the front of the cathedral, James stood tall in his dark green suit, his heart hammered inside his chest like a drum. He was 32 years old, with neat brown hair and kind eyes. James worked at a big bank, the kind where people move millions of dollars with just a few clicks on a computer. He was rich, very rich, but money had never made him feel as happy as he felt right now. Today, he would marry Victoria. Victoria stood beside him in a white dress covered in delicate lace. She looked like a princess from a storybook. Her blonde hair was pulled back perfectly. Her smile was bright and confident. Victoria was 29 and worked as a lawyer, the kind who won every argument and never showed fear. Together, they looked like the perfect couple, the kind you see in magazines. The old priest stood before them, his wrinkled hands holding a thick book. His voice was soft but strong as it echoed through the cathedral. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to join these two people in holy marriage. Marriage is a sacred bond, built on love, trust, and commitment." James glanced at Victoria. She winked at him. His stomach fluttered with butterflies. Behind James stood his best man, Richard Morrison. Richard was tall and handsome, with slick back hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. He wore an expensive suit and a watch that cost more than most people's cars. Richard worked with James at the bank. They had been friends for years. Everything was perfect, too perfect. Then, the heavy wooden doors of the back of the cathedral burst open with a loud bang. Everyone turned. A small figure stood in the doorway, breathing hard. It was a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. His clothes were torn and dirty. His face was smudged with dust. His feet were bare, covered in cuts and mud. His wild brown hair stuck up in every direction. The boy's eyes were wide and desperate. "Please," the boy shouted. His voice cracked and echoed to the silent cathedral. "Please don't marry her. You can't." Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. Ladies covered their mouths. Men stood up from their seats. The priest froze, his mouth hanging open. James felt his blood turn cold. 2 security guards in black suits rushed toward the boy from the sides of the cathedral. Their heavy boots thudded on the marble floor. But the boy was fast. He darted down the center aisle, dodging between the pews. His bare feet slapped against the cold stone. He was running straight toward James. "Stop him," someone shouted. "Get that kid out of here," another voice yelled. But the boy kept running. His eyes locked on James. Tears streamed down his dirty cheeks. "Please, Mr. James," the boy cried. "You have to listen to me. Please." James's heart nearly stopped. Mr. James. The boy knew his name. The security guards were closing in. One grabbed the boy's shoulder, but the boy twisted away. He stumbled, caught himself, and kept running. He was only steps away from the altar now. "I have to tell you," the boy screamed. "I have to tell you the truth." James held up his hand. "Wait," he said to the guards. His voice was shaky but firm. "Wait. I know this boy." Everyone froze. Victoria turned to James, her face pale. "What? You know this street child." James stared at the boy. Yes, he did know him. The memory came flooding back like a dam breaking in his mind. 6 months ago, James had volunteered at a homeless shelter downtown. He went every Saturday to help serve food. There had been a woman there with her son, a thin boy with sad eyes who never smiled. The boy had thanked James for the soup. The boy had said James was the nicest man he'd ever met. This was that boy. "Marcus," James whispered. The boy, Marcus, nodded frantically. Yes, Mr. James. It's me. I came here because I had to warn you." "Warn me?" James's voice cracked. Warn me about what? Marcus looked up at Victoria. Then he looked at Richard. His small hand trembled as he pointed at them both. About her, Marcus said, his voice shaking with fear and courage. About them. Victoria's perfect smile vanished. Richard's face went white as paper. Marcus took a deep breath. His whole body shook. But he spoke anyway, his words loud and clear enough for everyone to hear. She's lying to you, Mr. James. She doesn't love you. She's been sneaking around with him. Marcus pointed directly at Richard. They've been together for a whole year. They're planning to steal all your money. The cathedral exploded with noise. People gasped. People shouted. Some stood up so fast their chairs fell backward with loud crashes. James felt the world tilt sideways. His ears rang. His vision blurred. What? He whispered. What did you just say? Marcus stepped closer. Tears poured down his face, but his voice stayed strong. I heard them talking, Mr. James. 2 days ago, I was sleeping behind a coffee shop near your office. They didn't see me. They said after the wedding she'd take half of everything you own, $40 million. Then she'd divorce you and run away with him. James turned to Victoria. Her beautiful face twisted with something ugly, something James had never seen before. Victoria, James said slowly. His voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Tell me this isn't true. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and in that terrible silence, James already knew the answer. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. Her face turned from white to red to white again. She looked at James, then at Richard, then at the 200 people staring at her with wide, shocked eyes. This is ridiculous. Victoria finally shouted. Her voice came out high and sharp. This is some homeless kid trying to ruin our wedding. James, you can't possibly believe. Answer the question, James interrupted. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a knife. Is it true? Victoria laughed, but it sounded wrong. Fake, like a toy with dying batteries. Of course it's not true. Look at him. She pointed at Marcus with a shaking finger. He's probably mentally ill. He's a street child. Why would you believe some dirty little? Because he knew about the $40 million. James said. The cathedral went silent again. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. James took a step toward Victoria. His green eyes had turned cold. Nobody knows the exact number except you, me, and my lawyer. James continued. His words came out slow and careful, like he was solving a puzzle in his head. I never told anyone the amount of my inheritance, not even Richard. But this boy just said $40 million exactly. Victoria's face crumbled. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the fear in her eyes anymore. How would a homeless child know that number, Victoria? James asked, unless he really did hear you talking about it. Marcus stepped forward. His bare feet left small, dusty prints on a clean cathedral floor. I can tell you more, Marcus said. His voice was small but brave. I can tell you everything I heard. No! Victoria screamed. She lunged toward Marcus, but James caught her arm. Stop him. Somebody stop that lying little. Let him speak, James said firmly. He released Victoria's arm and turned to Marcus. Go ahead. Son, tell me what you heard. Marcus wiped his nose with his dirty sleeve. He looked up at all the fancy people staring at him. Some looked angry. Some looked shocked. Some looked like they wanted to hear more. Marcus swallowed hard and began. I live on the streets with my mama, Marcus said. We sleep wherever we can. 2 nights ago, we were behind the coffee shop on 5th Street. You know the one with the blue sign? James nodded. That was the coffee shop near his office building. It was late, Marcus continued. Maybe 10 o'clock. I was trying to sleep, but then I heard voices. A man and a woman were standing by the back door where the trash cans are. They were whispering, but not quiet enough. Marcus pointed at Victoria. She said, Only 2 more days, Richard. Then we'll be rich. The crowd gasped again. Victoria's face turned the color of ash. That's when I peeked around the trash can. Marcus said, I saw her, and I saw him. He pointed at Richard, who stood frozen like a statue. They were holding hands. Then they kissed. Someone in the audience made a choking sound. A woman started crying. Richard finally moved. He stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. This is insane. Richard shouted, James, this kid is making everything up. Why would I? Let him finish, James said. His voice was like ice. Marcus kept going. His words tumbled out faster now, like water from a broken dam. The man, Richard, he said, are you sure James suspects nothing? And she laughed. She said, James is so busy with his bank stuff, he doesn't notice anything. He thinks I work late every Tuesday and Thursday. He has no idea I'm with you. Victoria made a strange sound, like a wounded animal. She covered her face with her hands. Then Richard said something about after the wedding. Marcus continued. He said, 6 months after you're married, you'll file for divorce. California, law means you get half of everything. That's $20 million for each of us. And she said, actually, it's $40 million total, which means $20 million each. Enough for us to start our new life in France. France. The word hung in the air like poison gas. James felt something break inside his chest. Not his heart, his trust, his faith in the person he thought he loved. He turned to Victoria slowly. France, he repeated. You hate France. You told me you'd never want to live there. Victoria lowered her hands. Her eyes were red, but no tears fell. Something changed in her face. The mask of the perfect bride cracked and fell away completely. What was left behind was cold and hard. Fine, Victoria said. Her voice was different now. Flat. Mean. Fine. You want the truth? Here's the truth. She crossed her arms over her white lace dress. Yes, Richard and I have been together for a year. Yes, we planned this. And you know what, James? You made it easy. James felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Victoria laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You're never home, she continued, her voice rising. You're always at the office, working late, making more money you don't even need. When was the last time you took me to dinner? When was the last time you noticed my new haircut or asked about my day? So you cheated on me? James's voice cracked. I chose someone who actually pays attention to me. Victoria shot back. Richard makes me feel alive. You make me feel like a decoration in your big empty house. The crowd murmured. Some people nodded. Others shook their heads in disgust. And yes, Victoria continued, her eyes flashing, I was going to take your money. You have so much of it. James, $40 million you inherited from your grandfather. Money you didn't even earn. What's wrong with me getting half of it for putting up with your boring life? James felt numb. He turned to Richard. And you? James asked quietly. My best man? My friend. Richard wouldn't meet his eyes. He stared at the floor. I'm sorry, Richard mumbled. I didn't plan for it to happen. Victoria and I just connected, and the money would have helped us both start fresh. Start fresh by stealing from me. James said. Richard said nothing. Marcus tugged on James's sleeve gently. Mr. James, Marcus said softly, I had to tell you. You were so nice to me and my mama at the shelter. You gave us extra bread to take home. You smiled at us like we mattered. I couldn't let them hurt you. James looked down at the small boy with the dirty face and bare feet. This child, who had nothing, had traveled across the city to save him. This boy had more honor than the woman he almost married or the best man standing beside him. James knelt down so he was eye level with Marcus. How did you get here? James asked gently. I walked, Marcus said. It took 3 hours. My feet hurt real bad, but I had to warn you before the wedding. 3 hours. A 7-year-old boy had walked 3 hours on bare feet to save a man who'd given him bread. James felt warm tears roll down his cheeks. He stood up and turned to the priest, who stood silent and pale behind the altar. Father, James said clearly, there will be no wedding today. Victoria's eyes went wide. James, wait. Get out, James said. He looked at Victoria, then at Richard. Both of you, get out of this church. Now. James, we can talk about this. Richard started. Out. James roared. His voice echoed to the cathedral like thunder. Security guards appeared on both sides. They took Victoria by one arm and Richard by the other. Victoria's perfect dress dragged on the floor as they pulled her toward the door. Richard stumbled, his expensive shoes slipping on the marble. You'll regret this. Victoria screamed. You'll be sorry, James Whitfield. But James didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Marcus, the brave little boy who'd save his life. As the heavy doors closed behind Victoria and Richard, the cathedral erupted in whispers and gasps. And James knew that everything had changed. The heavy cathedral doors slammed shut with final, echoing boom. Victoria and Richard were gone. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 200 people sat frozen in their fancy clothes, staring at the altar where a wedding was supposed to happen. James stood perfectly still, his hand resting gently on Marcus's small shoulder. The boy looked up at him with worried eyes. Did I do the right thing, Mr. James? Marcus whispered. His voice trembled. Are you mad at me? James knelt down again. He looked into Marcus's eyes that had seen too much hardness for a child so young. Eyes that still held kindness despite everything. Mad at you? James said softly. He pulled Marcus into a hug. You saved my life. Marcus hugged him back, his thin arms wrapping around James's neck. The boy's shoulders shook as he finally let himself cry. Not scared crying. Not worried crying. Relief crying. I was so scared you wouldn't believe me. Marcus sobbed into James's shoulder. I thought you'd make me leave. I thought. Shoo, James said gently, patting the boy's back. You were the bravest person here today. You told the truth when it was hard. That takes real courage. The old priest cleared his throat. Everyone looked up at him. Well, the priest said, his wrinkled face breaking into a small smile. This is certainly the most unusual wedding I've ever performed. Or, I suppose, not performed. A few people in the audience laughed nervously. Then a few more. Soon, the whole cathedral filled with soft laughter. Not mean laughter, but the kind that comes when people don't know what else to do. James stood up, still holding Marcus's hand. He turned to face the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, James said, his voice was stronger now, clearer. I'm sorry you came all this way for a wedding that didn't happen. But I'm grateful, truly grateful, that the truth came out before I made the biggest mistake of my life. People started clapping, slowly at first, then louder. Soon the whole cathedral thundered with applause. An older woman in a purple dress stood up from her seat. James recognized her as his Aunt Margaret. That boy is a hero. Aunt Margaret shouted, pointing at Marcus. 3 cheers for the brave little man. Hip, hip, hooray! The crowd shouted together. Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Marcus's dirty face turned bright red. He tried to hide behind James, but he was smiling now, a real smile that reached his eyes. James looked down at Marcus. You said you walked 3 hours to get here? Marcus nodded. Yes, sir. From downtown. My mama is back at our spot. I told her I had to do something important. She's probably real worried about me now. Your mama, James repeated, his heart squeezed. Marcus, where is your spot? Where do you and your mother sleep? Marcus looked at his dirty feet. Under the bridge by the river. There's a dry place where the rain doesn't get us. The cathedral went quiet again, but this was a different kind of quiet, a sad quiet, a quiet full of shame that a child and his mother had to sleep under a bridge. James made a decision. Marcus, he said firmly, do you know what I was going to do with all the money I spent on this wedding? Marcus shook his head. I was going to waste it on a party for people who don't really care about me. James said. He looked out at the crowd, at the fancy dresses and expensive suits. But instead, I'm going to do something better. He knelt down one more time, so he was face to face with Marcus. I'm going to help you and your mother, James said. I'm going to find your mama right now, and I'm going to make sure both of you never have to sleep under a bridge again. I'll help her get a job, A real job with good pay. I'll make sure you have a home. A real home with a roof and heat and a bed. Marcus's eyes went so wide they looked like they might pop out his head. Really? Marcus breathed. You do that? You saved me from losing $20 million to people who wanted to hurt me. James said, that's worth more than I can ever repay. But I can start by making sure the boy who saved my life gets to be a kid again. A kid with a home and food, and maybe even some shoes. Marcus looked at his bare, cut-up feet. Then he looked back at James. Tears rolled down his cheeks again, but these were happy tears. Thank you, Mr. James, Marcus whispered. Thank you so much. James stood and addressed the crowd once more. There's still food at the reception hall, James announced, and music and cake. I paid for all of it, and it would be a shame to waste it. So I'm inviting all of you to come celebrate something better than a wedding. Let's celebrate truth. Let's celebrate courage. Let's celebrate the fact that a 7-year-old boy is wiser and braver than most adults. The crowd erupted in applause again. People stood up, nodding and smiling. Some dabbed at their eyes with fancy handkerchiefs. James's Aunt Margaret rushed forward. She pulled off her silk scarf and wrapped it gently around Marcus's shoulders like a cape. Every hero needs a cape, she said with a wink. More people came forward. A man took off his suit jacket and offered it to Marcus. A woman pulled out a pair of her son's shoes from her bag. She brought them in case her own shoes got uncomfortable. Try these, she said kindly, kneeling to help Marcus put them on. They were a little big, but they fit well enough. Soon Marcus stood at the front of the cathedral, wrapped in a silk scarf cape, wearing shoes that were slightly too large, surrounded by smiling people who wanted to shake his hand. The priest came over and placed a gentle hand on Marcus's head. Blessed are the pure in heart, the priest said softly, for they shall see God. And blessed are those who speak truth, for they shall save souls. Marcus didn't understand all the fancy words, but he understood kindness. He understood love, and he understood that something good had happened today. James pulled out his phone and made a call. Hello, Charles. James said into the phone. Charles was his driver. I need you to bring the car around. We're going downtown to pick up someone very important. He looked at Marcus. Can you tell me exactly where your mama is? Marcus nodded eagerly. Under the bridge at 5th Street. She'll be near the big pillar with the graffiti heart on it. Did you hear that, Charles? James said into the phone. 5th Street Bridge. Fast as you can. James hung up and took Marcus's hand. Come on, James said. Let's go get your mama. Then we're all going to the reception together. You're the guest of honor now. As they walked down the aisle toward the cathedral doors, the 200 guests stood and clapped. They clapped for Marcus. They clapped for truth. They clapped for the reminder that real worth isn't measured by designer clothes or bank accounts. Real worth is measured by courage, by kindness, by loyalty. James pushed open the heavy doors. Sunshine poured in bright and warm. Marcus looked up at him. Mr. James? Yes. Do you think my mama will believe me when I tell her what happened today? James laughed, a real, genuine laugh. The first real laugh he'd had in months. Probably not, James said, but we'll tell her together. They walked out into the sunshine, hand in hand. Behind them, the guests filed out, chattering excitedly about the most unusual wedding day anyone had ever seen. And somewhere in the distance, under a bridge by 5th Street, a worried mother waited for her son to come home, not knowing that her life was about to change forever. Because sometimes, the smallest voice speaking the loudest truth can change everything. Did this story touch your heart? Then don't forget to. Like this story if Marcus's courage inspired you. Comment below and tell us. Have you ever had to tell a hard truth to save someone? What happened? Subscribe for more amazing stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that honesty and courage matter more than money or status. What should we write about next? Drop your ideas in the comments below. Your story suggestion might be our next viral hit. Remember, the smallest act of kindness can create the biggest change. Be like Marcus. Be brave. Speak truth.